All right, so today we're going to dive into a really fascinating political thought experiment. We spend so much time debating what governments should be doing, but let's set that aside for a minute and ask a much more awkward and maybe even more important question. What can a government actually get done?
Okay, so here's the big one, the central question. Imagine this, you've just won an election. Fantastic! But there's absolutely no guarantee you'll be reelected. You've got one shot, one single term. So what do? What do you prioritize? What do you even try to change? And let's be clear, the rules of this game are pretty strict. This isn't some fantasy where you can wave a magic wand and fix everything. Nope. The goal isn't to build a perfect system from the ground up. It's all about what's realistically possible inside the messy, time-crunched reality of just one term.
So when you're faced with a challenge like that, what's the natural instinct? Well, it's to go big, right? You reach for the biggest, most impressive levers you can possibly find. I mean, you see these kinds of ideas pop up all the time. Rewriting the whole system, replacing entire institutions. They feel so decisive, don't they? They sound really structural, like you're finally getting to the root of the problem and making a clean break. And honestly, who isn't attracted to that? But this is where that big, shiny promise slams right into a very harsh reality. These massive, sweeping changes, they need a level of political consensus and, frankly, time that just doesn't exist in a single term. It's just not going to happen. They aren't one-term fixes, and pretending they are, well, that just sets everyone up for disappointment all over again. So this forces us to completely reframe the problem. Instead of asking, how can I fix everything forever, we need to ask something way more honest and a lot more practical. Something like, what change could we make that's so tough, so resilient, that it would actually still be there even if we lost the next election?
And to answer that question, we have to look at the problems that are quietly doing the most damage, no matter who's in charge. See, these aren't about ideology. This isn't left versus right. It's about plain old dysfunction.
It's this vicious cycle, and it works like this. First, you get churn. Key people are constantly leaving their jobs right when they're finally getting good at them. That leads to compression. Suddenly there's no time, and huge decisions get rushed. And what does that lead to? Forgetfulness. The same mistakes get made over and over because real scrutiny only ever happens when it's way too late to fix anything. This cycle just keeps repeating, election after election, and it's like this invisible engine driving so many failures.
Okay, and this right here is the absolute key. We are totally obsessed with outcomes. The specific policies on housing or healthcare or whatever. But what this manifesto is saying is, hey, maybe we should be focusing on the conditions instead. The how. How is time actually structured? How do we protect expertise? How do we build a system that can actually learn from its mistakes?
And that brings us to the actual proposals. A manifesto that, isn't about splashy promises, but about creating the right conditions for better government to happen.
And first things first, honesty. This kind of manifesto would have to be totally upfront about what it can't do. It wouldn't promise to, fix housing or healthcare in 5 years. Why? Because anyone who's actually looked at these problems knows that's just not possible. And being clear about those limits, that's the first step to actually rebuilding some trust. So instead, it would commit to these 4, well, let's admit it, pretty unglamorous reforms. First, a smoother calendar, which tackles that compression problem we talked about. Second, longer tenure in key roles to fight the churn. Third, bringing scrutiny in way earlier in the game, which helps with the forgetfulness. And finally, making it normal, not a failure, to say, hey, this isn't working, so things can actually get fixed and maintained.
Now look, this isn't some magic bullet, right? It doesn't guarantee a perfect outcome every single time. But what it does do is it changes the odds. It's like stacking the deck in favor of good decisions. It creates a system where thoughtful, well-informed choices are just more plausible, more likely to happen over the long haul.
Okay, I know what you might be thinking. This all sounds a little underwhelming, a little modest. But here's the twist. Here's why this quiet, kind of boring approach is actually the most ambitious plan of all. Think about it. Those big, flashy reforms are all about the photo op, the ribbon-cutting ceremony. They completely depend on one government having all the answers. And guess what? They can be torn down just as easily by the next one. But these resilient, condition-based changes, they stick around. They don't care who's in power. They just quietly, persistently shape the entire environment where decisions get made. The source material for this explainer puts it perfectly with this one phrase. It's just brilliant. The goal is to create a system where memory has somewhere to live.
Just think about that for a second. It's not just about files and reports, it's about building a real institutional memory so we can finally stop paying to learn the exact same lessons over and over and over again.
And really, that's the true prize here. A government that leaves behind a system that is just fundamentally better designed for thinking. A system that's harder to rush. A system that actually remembers what it already knows. I mean, what could possibly be more ambitious than leaving that behind?
And so all of this leaves us with one last kind of unavoidable question. If we don't actively and purposefully design for that kind of continuity, what are we choosing instead, by default? Well, the answer is pretty clear, isn't it? It's the same cycle of churn, compression, and forgetfulness we're already stuck in. So maybe the most radical, ambitious act of all is to finally choose something different.